They lived in a motorhome, my great-grandparents. They both watched wrestling, and they would watch the 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock show, and then there would be a break between 8 and 9, and then they would watch the 8 or the 9 to 11 as if they never saw the first run. They were so crazy into wrestling.
Oh, they watched the same show again?
The same rerun, like immediately the same night, like Monday Night Raw, what they called it. It was, and they loved it. They had keychains and Stone Cold Steve Austin with the middle finger. Like I remember just growing up, listening to them.
That's amazing.
Yeah, man, it was crazy, and they loved it. And you listen and you see these elderly people with their Budweiser. I mean, they weren't big drinkers, like at all, but like just cheering on, like get up, going. It was nuts.
We actually call our grandmother Nying, which is the Chinese word for grandmother on the father's side of the family.
I call him Grandpa Foot.
We, in our native language, in Hindi, we call them Dada and Dadi.
My other grandmother would be Maman Bozorg, which is Persian for grandmother.
Muchechu means old woman in Kinyarwanda.
I called her Safta, which is a Hebrew word for grandma.
Everybody called her Mamitita.
We called her Mima and Dede.
Grandma.
Hi, I'm Steph.
And I'm Robin. Welcome to Stories from Grandparents,
the podcast where we share stories about and from grandparents.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mick. And you're the host of the Mick's Picks podcast. And if any of our listeners want any sort of sports knowledge, just tune in because you can learn a lot. And I'm not even a sports person, and I felt like I learned a lot just listening. But we are here to talk about grandparents. So where do you want to start? Who are you talking about today?
So, I'd like to talk about my grandmother, Alice. She's really close with me, always has been growing up. She is on my mom's side. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about her. So she's pretty crazy. Excuse me, I had to drink there. Yeah, no. So my grandma's, she's a funny old lady. She's compassionate. She's no bullshit. She says it how it is. And I think, I was very fortunate to have her mother, my great grandmother, also a part of my life growing up, a very big part of my life, in fact. And we did crazy things from fishing and going to WWF wrestling matches and almost being thrown out with, 80, 90-year-old great grandparents. And so my grandma was their daughter, and they lived in Vancouver area. I was in Penticton. They never came often in the summer times, just with the driving, it was easier. So they came once or twice a year when we were really young. And my dad always wanted to put me into hockey. So when they did that or decided they wanted to do that, my grandparents were against it. They said, no, you're going to get hurt. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to get a concussion. You're going to get broken bones, blah, blah, blah. Why do you want to do that to your kid? But they did it anyways. They put me in. And so my grandparents would come and visit us occasionally, during the hockey season now. So it started with summer, went to hockey season, and they came and visited us and watched hockey games. And I think it grew on them a little bit. And then I started getting a little more older, and they were a big part of my life, helping me get through the cost of hockey. My mom was a single mom, 3 jobs, the whole story, hard worker, but she just needed a little help, and my grandparents were fortunate enough to be able to do that. But they weren't sure off the hop. I remember a little, I think I was like 10 or something when they were talking about helping us, and they weren't sure about it. They said, well, is he going to get hurt? Is he going to break bones and blah, blah, blah. But they did. They helped us, put me through hockey. And then what happened was they moved to Penticton. When I was in probably grade 8, grade 9. They moved to Penticton and became a lot closer with the family, and a bigger part of our life. They were, there for graduation growing up and all the hockey years. We won provincials one year, and they made it as banners, and they grabbed the whole Okanagan hockey school. It's just world known. And they gathered them all there, and our bus rolled in after winning the provincial championship in the middle of the night. And they were there with the banner, and they were there with their people, and they coordinated the whole damn thing. And I was like, I didn't find that out until years later. She told me. And
that's super special. I get chills and tears. Yeah,
right?
That's really sweet.
And just there for us, and my sister too. She was in dance and she was in soccer and different things, so she helped them out. She helped her out too with just support. Being there. And it's funny because I'll never forget this. When I was younger, I was quite good. I remember my grandma was living in Vancouver. I think it was the year they moved up, and she said, "Brendan, I'm going to give you $5 a goal this year." I said, "Okay." And I think I was 12 or 13 or something. Well, I went out and I scored 110 goals that year. I remember her getting my first check from my grandma with, the math. I'm terrible, but yeah. And I had a chart that I would keep track of. And I'm 33, going on 33 years old this year, and she still does it to this day. She'll walk up and go, here's a little something. And she's just crazy like that. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So your grandma's still alive?
She is. Yeah. Actually, I spoke to her before this call. I didn't tell her I was doing it.
No? How come?
She just got on Facebook. So she's a little nervous when it comes to social media. So she didn't know if she wanted to have her name and her face on Facebook. And this is actually last year, almost this exact time last year. She does a bunco group with her girlfriends, I guess, back home, and they play dice. It's like a board game, I think. It's way beyond my years for sure. I think it's like, I don't know, Chinese checkers, bunco. You roll a dice, ramoli. I don't know. Excuse me, but so, anyways, she plays bunco every week, and her favorite movie character as a cartoon is Betty Boop. So she created this Betty Bunco on Facebook, put a picture of Betty Boop, thought she could get away with it. Facebook kicked her off. They said, "You're not allowed. You're impersonating somebody else." And so she says, "I'm not doing any of this social media. I can't stand it. I don't know what to do." And so her friends over the course of the last year, with Zoom becoming popular and like meetings and group chats, and they're unable to get together and stuff, so they do Zoom. Well, now they're using Messenger. And so she's learning Messenger, and she's like, she says to me before the call, "Oh, well, I had to hop from one chat to another because we're playing games, and one group has this game and another group has that game. And all of a sudden I'm in the wrong rooms and I'm trying to figure out where I belong." It's the funniest thing, but yeah, so she's very up to date with technology. She always has been. Yeah, she's had her iPhone. She goes in right to the telestore whenever she has a problem. She doesn't piss around calling anybody. She goes right to the store. But yeah, she's still alive and well too. We talk on the phone every other day. We talk about sports. We talk about hockey. We talk about the Canucks. She hated hockey, like I said, was against it, didn't want to put me in it growing up, ended up falling in love with it, getting me through it, celebrating it with the banners, the teams. And then as I got older, got a job, I was able to take her to her very first hockey game. And we did that in Vancouver 3 years ago. And it was the LA Kings and Vancouver Canucks. I remember we got a hotel room. I got one with my wife, my grandma, and grandpa theirs. We all met in the one room before, and we had our tickets, and we're holding our tickets. And she was so excited, my grandma. I've never seen a grown woman so excited. And then when we got to the game, she's looking at the stadium and the lights, and she's, "Brendan, get your ticket ready. We got to get our tickets. Let's go. Let's get our tickets." And she would bring it in. We bring it in and go in. And then I splurged. I got like third row behind the players bench, like just a nice, good seat for her to love it. Right. So she was watching the warm-ups, and she's up on the glass, like already in the warm-ups. And you just see a child in this old lady, and she was loving it. And we were cheering them on, and she's yelling at them, watching them come through the little walkway from their dressing room to the ice, and she's cheering them on. And that year they had this coach named Willie Desjardins or Desjardins or something was their name. And she didn't like him. She hated him. We're at this hockey game, and my grandmother, she starts this chant, "Willie's gotta go. Willie's gotta go. Willie's gotta go." And everyone around us starts chanting it too, because they're losing. And the players are turning around and they're looking at us, and "Willie's gotta go." And she's screaming. Anyway, they leave. They lose the game. Unfortunately, they lost our first game. They're walking out. She's screaming, "Willie's gotta go. Willie's gotta go." They fired Willie 2 days later. They fired him. He was done. And she's screaming and yelling. And I tell you, she was so excited. So that was game one. The next year we took her to another one. So we got to go to another one. This time I want to bring my wife. I want to bring grandpa, the four of us. Let's go to a game. The Sedins, Daniel and Henrik Sedin were a big part of the Vancouver Canucks franchise for many, many years. And it was potentially their last year in Vancouver. So they were visiting us in Fort McMurray. The game was in April. They were visiting in September, October, November, December. Yeah, almost like 7 months prior to the game. And I said, well, let's get tickets for the last game, home game of the season. The tickets were $142 a ticket. Same thing, third row back from the bloody players bench. Amazing price that far ahead. That night of the game, they were going for $3,000 a ticket. And we bought those tickets ahead of time. We went to the game. We created these signs that said, there was 2 blue signs with big hearts, and one heart had 22 and one heart had 33, and Forever Canucks written underneath each number. And we were shown on the Jumbotron. It was my wife and I's anniversary, so I had emailed the rink and said, could you put happy anniversary, love Brendan on the thing? So they did that. And not only that, we won for our signs 2 signed s2e9 jerseys that night. And we're all shown on the Jumbotron. You are the winner. We made Sportsnet. And it was the most magical night of hockey that I could probably have ever shared with anybody. You know, the 3 people I had with me it was my wife and my grandparents, right? And for them to not wanting me to play hockey when I was younger at first, and going through all these years with me, it was kind of like the moment, like, this is the best possible thing that, you know, we could have had and shared, and we did. And I'll send you guys a picture of that as well, because it was a pretty cool little thing we put together, and it was just the most memorable night. You know, it was just a very amazing moment, amazing night. And they retired that night. That was their last game. They were down 3-1 going into the third. They won it in overtime. And the place went nuts. Yeah. And they skated around and said their salute, and we picked up our winning jerseys. They're signed on my wall over here. And just crazy. And you know,
so good.
That's so satisfying.
Yeah, what a validating moment. Hey, like from the Jumbotron, and then getting the signed jerseys, and it's just all kind of meant to be. And what about your great grandparents? Are they still alive?
No, so we lost them, unfortunately, about 6 and 8 years ago. They went shortly after on my great-grandparents' love story. My great-grandma was engaged I think she was 16. And she met my grandpa out of nowhere. He was a stopover in the war. They met. She broke up her engagement, met him. 2 days later, they went away together. They were married for 80 years. And you don't see that anymore. Like, just...
No. Where was he from?
Canada. I can't remember Second World War, First World War, I guess it would have been. But he was a mechanic, so he just did like mechanic stuff, and he was shipped out, and she met him. And my grandmother, who we're talking about, and her sister and her brothers put together this play years ago, and it told their story, and they filmed it, and they all dressed up as them as characters, and they set it up like there was an old saloon and there was an old different thing, like, and they celebrated, I think it was their 65th wedding anniversary when they did this play.
Oh wow.
Right? Yeah. And I mean, somewhere in the home movies we have it, VHS.
That would be such a treasure. So what did they ever talk about, like what drew them to each other? Like what it was that
my great grandparents?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I sat down and I talked with my papa a few years back, and I asked him all these different questions about how was it like to grow up with all the technology changes you got to witness. There's all these changes, and then he kept on going back to love and just being a good human. And I think that both of them were that. My papa loved to fix everything. He loved to just help people and be there, and just in any way that he could. You knew the love was there, but you know, they were just straight up with one another. And every night, I do remember my nanny saying, like, every night you got to say I love you, and you got to give your significant other a kiss. So that's my great grandparents. So like I said, very fortunate enough to have them. We are Aboriginal, so we're called Mushum and Cookum Cree over the years till they died. My stepfather's Cree. So
I was just curious about the wrestling. I feel like I don't often I don't often hear of elderly people, if you will, or like seniors getting really into wrestling. Like, did they talk about what they liked about it?
All of it. They love the excitement. They love the action. They love the I think more so the storylines as well, because back in I watched it as a kid, but like in the late 90s, there was a lot of that. They would tie in politics. Donald Trump was back on it back then. They would bring in movie stars. Madonna, The Rock became a huge movie star, but they would build that character of these athletes in a way where they could market it in many different ways. And I think they loved that. They loved just the fake reality of it all. Like, you knew when you were hitting them, whoa, 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 wow, and they're moving. Or like, when they would slam them through the tables, they would get excited. And I remember hearing stories. She almost got tossed or did get tossed. I remember we took her to SmackDown in Kelowna, which is one of the WWF wrestling featured shows that they would air once a week, whatever day. And, she was in heaven. It was insane. Absolutely insane. A kid in a candy shop.
I feel like our generation, like late 90s, we did have like the peak of wrestling in my mind.
100%.
It was so popular. I watched wrestling, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, like that whole storyline.
I will admit that I only watched wrestling briefly because I wanted to impress boys. So I'm like, oh yeah, I watch wrestling too. And I remember like the storyline when I watched it was Vince McMahon's daughter got kidnapped by The Undertaker. I think that's how I remember it.
Yes.
And I was like, this is theater.
Big
like,
deal.
This is so dramatic. Like I was expecting like, the wrestling.
And it got steamy too. Like it got borderline, like it got pornographic.
What?
It got
it got heated. China days. Remember when China then went in Playboy? It was a very big deal.
I missed this whole thing.
I definitely remember that now. There was a couple of them that I think did Playboy back in the day, but that was all that same timeline.
Because like I remember when we had remember back in the day like pay-per-view, but you could get like a box to get it like all for free. And so like I would try to have my friends over to watch it. And I remember getting in a huge argument with my dad about whether wrestling was real or not. And being like, Dad, look at the blood. Like, look at like that. It's like totally believing all of it was so real. Like I was totally sucked in and believed it all. But now when I look at it, I'm like, this is the worst writing ever. This is like, it's terrible. But I don't know what it's like today. Well, now it's WWE.
Some of it's terrible, but people love it. I think it is WWE. Yeah. I went to school. Well, I grew up with a guy who played hockey too. He went on to be a WWE wrestler, and he's still in it. He's down in Florida teaching. He's on there now. He's Blue Verification Instagram. He's made it as his wrestling career. And everyone thinks growing up, wrestling, it was just like, no, that's silly. But tell you, people love it, and it's a passion for a lot of people, right? My nanny never ever learned how to read either. She grew up in the prairies in Manitoba. My papa, however, they raised their family out there, and built a little home, small log home. Never learned how to read. So I remember growing up, she would always shop by pictures on products, and she would look at different things. But she was a very stern lady. If my papa was acting up, she'd give him shit. And, the love was there. Don't get me wrong. But it's the same with my grandma, my mom, my sister. They're all like, say it how it is. For sure. Just do what we got to do, get it, what we got to get done, and so on and so forth. But growing up in the prairies, never learned how to read, write, and I don't know why she didn't want to.
We're trying to like keep note of interesting things that are coming up in terms of themes and education. Obviously, there can be a big generational gap, and a lot of grandmas that like had to leave school at a young age to take care of their younger siblings, or just things like that they didn't get the opportunity. And
100%.
To get an education, or to even do something like a license, to be completely dependent on your partner to do that when you can't read. Like it's almost like having a handicap in life in that sense. Like you can't deal with banking, there's a lot you're relying on a man for.
And independence is something that I really feel a lot of us take it for granted, being able to hop in your car, go for a drive, clear your head. Nowadays it seems like we all need it. Then who knows, where did they drive to? Who knows? My great grandma would grow weed, marijuana plants, and she would never use the buds for nothing. But little did she know she was being a drug dealer.
Yeah,
totally.
So she didn't know that she was growing weed?
Well, her son, my uncle, I guess, set it all up for her and said the leaves would help in your tea, like just for flavor and medical purposes and whatever. And she says, "Oh, okay. So we'll put them in the thing." And so she was watering them every day along with whatever else they had in their little outside their motorhome during those years. It wasn't obviously all the time, but during those years, it was like a little greenhouse thing where they had plants down in Vancouver area and stuff. And yeah, so she's out watering everything. Little did she know. So she's picking. She goes, "Oh, this stinks. I don't like this one." So she puts the buds in a bag and then gave them away. Didn't even have a clue in the world on what it was.
She didn't know what it was.
No, not
so she was just like, "Oh, this is weird and it smells bad." Like here,
leaves were a different smell. I mean, I remember going down there like 13, 14, 15, 16, going like, "Oh, this is a gold mine." Like, holy crap, right?
Yeah,
like, and
totally.
I was like, how the hell does this woman think that this smells different from this? I don't know. I didn't get it, but you know,
that is so funny. I'm not a jealous person by nature or like envious, but part of me is a little envious of you, Mick, because I think I didn't have anything in common with my grandparents to that. So like I didn't have the friendship that you have. And I remember being like 20 or something, 2021. And my dad was like, you should really get closer with your grandmother. You should write her letters or something. And I was like, what am I even going to talk to her about? Like I enjoyed spending time with her when I would visit. Like she was back in New Brunswick and, we would hang out and stuff. But like I was just too immature to really take advantage, getting the wisdom, and appreciating it. But I think like part of it, like just hearing you talk about like, you talk to your grandmother every other day and like having these genuine passions in common that you can talk about and share and like the hockey. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And yeah, part of me is just a little jealous.
I definitely appreciate that. Very fortunate to have that chatter. So I do appreciate you pointing that out because sometimes, you just, I'll go, "Oh, grandma's calling again. Maybe we'll call her back," and stuff. And some people can't. So I do appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Stories from Grandparents. If you have any interest in submitting stories or if you want to participate on the podcast, please send us an email at storiesfromgrandparentspodcast@gmail.com.
And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It really helps us out.